Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by welcoming all of you to another version of AdvoChats. And also in this time of uncertainty with the current economic crisis, we've streamlined all our discussions to really understand the gravity, the magnitude of the crisis that that we all are experiencing. So hope everyone's resilient. Hope everyone is hopeful. We'll try to explore what we can do in the policy space to make sure that Sri Lanka comes out of the present economic crisis. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to another version of AdvoChats. The topic, let me quickly take a few minutes to introduce the topic, and we have an exciting panel of representing the medical and health sector to discuss this topic that has been proposed. As all of you might know, we're discussing the impact of the crisis on the Sri Lankan health sector. And we have a very eminent panel with us. We have Dr. Ilmini Vijaysurya, Senior Consultant Anesthetist, Teaching Hospital Ragma, Chief Crisis Coordinator, Chief Crisis Coordinator. Then we have Mr. T. Sandayan. He's the CEO of Sunshine Healthcare Lanka Limited, and he has over 30 years of experience working in different sectors of the health industry. Then we have Dr. Kosala Karunaratna, consultant physician, pediatrician, Lady Ridgeway Hospital, and President-elect of College of Pediatrics. So, ladies and gentlemen, I very warmly welcome all of you, especially our discussants for this evening. Let me just take a minute or so to just make a nuanced entry to the topic. As all of you know, we're currently experiencing and going through enormous Saudi debt crisis, and this has impacted all sectors of our economy, and the health sector is one of those sectors that is seriously being affected. I think this is also common to all debt crises that we've seen across the world. Greece, for example, there are numerous case studies on the kind of impact it had on the health sector. So I think the purpose of today's discussion is really explore the kind of impact that we're already experiencing, and also get the insights from our eminent panel on what needs to be done to really manage the country's short and medium-term healthcare needs, long-term, how we're going to come out of this, and also understand the real impact at the moment on the ground. So let's quickly make an entry to the discussion, and I applaud all our healthcare workers who really have been driving force for the past few years and really helping Sri Lanka throughout. By saying that, ladies and gentlemen, shall we start by really discussing as to what's really happening on the ground? What is the real impact of the current economic crisis on the health sector? Dr. Milmini, would you like to make your first entry and really give us your experience? Ma'am, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk to you all about the current crisis, how it relates to healthcare. So I think everybody should understand that if we need foreign currency to purchase fuel, gas and electricity, the same thing will apply to medicines and other consumables as well. So as an anesthesiologist and an intensivist looking after critically ill patients and patients who need surgery, I and our College of Anesthesiologists and Intensivists of Sri Lanka felt the need of getting ready for some crisis coming up. I think during last 2 years we have been dealing with COVID, which was also a health crisis, where we had an additional risk of healthcare professionals getting infected as well. So there were shortages due to lack of uh, like production of drugs and equipment. So we had a bit of experience last 2 years also, all these crises. And at the moment, I think early this year we had being sort of, we were noticing from various social media that currently the current country is going towards some economic crisis, and we as the college thought of getting ready for that. So in I think February, we were feeling this because there were some discussions with the ministry, and some ministry officials including the health minister indicated that they were facing the, although there were some social media and news items that there's no problem, don't worry, but we got to know only maybe about 2 months back that the real situation is looking very, very bleak. So, do you want me to continue how we got ready or how we face the situation now?
Yes, ma'am, sure.
Yeah, so to begin with, what we for to face any crisis, we have to know where we stand. So we need to get accurate data, because there were so many information coming which we were not very sure whether it's true, because some people used to say there's no problem, don't worry, and on the other hand, on the ground situation, we started to feel that some equipment and medicines and consumables were not coming as they were generally delivered to the hospital. So we started to feel that there was a lack of things coming to the hospitals in the ministry line. So then we decided to form a working group to face this crisis in the college. And then we had meetings with the Ministry of Health, the Medical Supplies Division, that is the MSD, and even SPC, to see where we stand. So we took some data from MSD, uh, where we had the general monthly consumption of, we actually concentrated mainly on our anesthetic drugs and drugs that were needed for intensive care units and for pain management. So what we did was we got a list of drugs. The MSD has a computerized system of all the drugs and consumables that we need for hospitals, and we got monthly requirement and the MSD stocks and the institutional stocks. So we had some idea about which drugs were sort of lacking and are in short supply. Then, but we had to get the ground situation, the realistic figures, which were quite difficult. So we reached to our membership, the consultants in working in all hospitals, through a Google form, and we started to collect all the data as much as possible through the pharmacist in the hospital to see which drugs were in short supply. And we prioritized the drugs which were life saving and very crucial, so that our patients don't die because of the shortages. So we concentrated mainly on the very, very essential items. So to tell you, like some drugs that will keep patients blood pressure in the intensive care unit, things like noradrenaline, dobutamine, that kind of drugs are in very short supply. And when you ventilate a patient, when you give artificial ventilation to somebody in the intensive care unit, sometimes you need to keep the patient still and paralyzed. Those drugs are called muscle relaxants, and for surgery we need them. So all these drugs were in very very short supply. So I'm not an economist, but very simple economics, how we manage at home or wherever. You need to balance the income and the expenditure. So we thought of developing some sort of method to see what we can get and how we should restrict our expenditure. So we thought of calling for help. If Subhashini can share that slide, where we had a banner, a poster. We requested for international help from our colleagues who are working abroad and also from the local donors. These are the, this is actually, she's showing the monthly requirement, an example of how we got the MSD details. Yeah, just the poster, Subhashini. So this poster we posted on Facebook and shared with our friends and colleagues, and we you can't see the slide, no? Right? Okay, that's all right. So, however, we started to get some people who were interested in helping. So some people were donating to the college account, and we tried to find through the medical supplies, the suppliers which were generally registered with the NMRA, who already had the registration, but they had very limited stocks. So therefore, whatever we could, we tried to purchase through them and send to the hospitals. And then because the people were helping and they were donating, then we concentrated on these muscle relaxants and the very essential drugs, and we got a lot of help. We have secured about 37,000 vials of muscle relaxants from Sri Lanka Medical Association in North America, and Sri Lanka Medical and Dental Association in the UK. They were helping to transport some consumables through the Sri Lankan Airlines and through the High Commission of UK, and also Visakha alumni in United States, and also Sri Lankan postgraduates who have settled down in the United Kingdom. They managed to collect 10,000 pounds over 2 days. So we were getting a lot of help, and they were asking what else we need. But as you know that we cannot go on depending on donors, because people cannot imagine the amount of money the government spends on healthcare. Because these, for example, to get 25,000 vials of the muscle relaxant atracurium, it costs you 15,000 US dollars. So to find that kind of money from donors is not always possible. It's just for the short term. We thought at least we'll target for 2 to 3 months to manage the anesthetic and intensive care services, so that our patients don't die or they don't get complications. That was our aim. Then we thought of how to cut down on expenditure. So I think a lot of wastage we can see in government sector, because people think it's all free. So there's so much of avenues there we can cut down on expenditure. So we made some new guidelines to stop people doing all unnecessary investigations on patients. Sometimes they just very junior doctors, they write all the investigations, but we can come down on it because we were running out of reagents in the laboratories. So what we did was we made a guideline. We had a guideline already which was quite old, so we updated that, and then we had a webinar to raise awareness how we can cut down on investigations cost. So that also works on well quite by making people aware, the junior doctors. And then we we also had another webinar where you teach them how to use anesthetic agents, the minimum that you need, so that we can cut down on the cost, like anesthetic gases, all that. So, and we try to utilize, say, we share one vial between two patients, and we use the same syringe washed on the same patient. So we used to try and on the ground level to cut down on expenses as much as possible. So those are the things that we have done so far, and we are very closely working with the Ministry of Health, MSD, and then MRA and SPC, getting information from them about the shortages and trying to make lists of places where they need from our consultants, and then to help them to distribute them equally to all the provinces in the country. So that's how we have been trying to mitigate these problems. So I think crisis is an opportunity. So I think this is a time that we should try and cut down on a lot of unnecessary wastage in the government hospitals.
Thank you, ma'am. I think if I was quickly to jump to Dr. Karunaratna, sir, what has your experience been, especially coming from a background where you treat kids as a pediatrician? Sir, what's your experience? What's the situation on ground?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Good evening, everybody. So I'm a pediatrician working at Ledridge Hospital, the largest children's hospital in the island. And I think Dr. Nilmini covered most of the things that we are doing as well. So I'll just briefly tell you what we are doing regarding kids. So little bit about the basics I thought of telling, because of the audience might not know some of the terms that we are using. So the main thing that everybody should understand is 80% of our drugs and pharmaceuticals are imported. So that means only a little amount is produced in our country. That is also by SPMC, that is State Pharmaceuticals Corporation. For example, they produce paracetamol to hospitals. So, and some few drugs. Other than those drugs, most of the drugs are purchased from other countries, India and the West. So basically, these drugs are purchased by an institution called the MSD, Medical Supply Division, where they will get down all the pharmaceutical, not only the pharmaceuticals, the surgical items, the lab items, and even radioisotope items, and even printed material, the MSD will get down from other countries. And most of them are not produced in our country. So basically, to get it down, you need dollars. So that is, they have to get it down through agents. Now the MSD will have, for a certain, if you take one cancer drug, there will be several agents for that, and they will call for quotations, and then they will choose one bidder and ask them to get it down, and the particular agent will open a LC, and from those dollars we'll get it down. So what happened to our country was, a sudden, like a bombshell, we realized that we don't have foreign forex. So basically, that led to all these problems. So what happened at Ledridge Hospital? So being the premier most hospital for children, we suddenly realized that we are lacking some of the what you call vital drugs. The vital drugs are the drugs that without those drugs, the patient will die. So some of them I can tell you that some drugs like potassium chloride, I'm sure Dr. Lee Vinyasa would be experience the deficiency of KCl, the IV solution of the KCl and the tablets. We didn't have any stocks at all, to realize. And then some of the other drugs like drugs used for transplanting. There's a particular drug called tacrolimus, and that also was in zero supply. So it was shocking. So we being the premier most hospital for children, we do renal transplants, the bone marrow transplants, and liver transplants where these drugs are needed, especially tacrolimus. So I can mention some of the other vital drugs as well, but these were some examples. So what we decided to do at Ledridge level is, we formed a committee, including the director, deputy director, and some of the consultants, where I also am a member, and we identify what the vital drugs are, and what are the essential drugs. So they are not, I mean, life saving, but without those drugs, you can treat some conditions, and non essential drugs. So out of the vital drugs that were lacking, the ones I mentioned, we prioritize. So then we were looking for ways to get these drugs. So it was at the beginning very difficult, confusing, because now when we went to the MSD, they were okay. They are not supposed to give information about the drugs. So you can't directly ask the MSD, okay, what are the stocks you have? So, but there are ways to get it. So we got lists of drugs and the stocks they had, and made uh, a database of all the drugs that are in zero supply at Ledridgeway, and whether we can get it from MSD, and made a list and circulated it. Mainly we got the College of Pediatricians involved, and got all the pediatricians, as like Dr. Nilmini said. We also did a Google form, and got all details of other pediatricians as well, and made a list of vital and essential drugs. Then came the next step: how to get these drugs. Okay, so the main, the shocking truth is, for the next few months, we may not have stocks. So just to you elaborate on that, we have only one third of the stores, the requirements in our hospital. So we had to act fast. We first, what we did was, we tried to get donors, as Dr. Nilmini said. It was very difficult how to streamline that. So again, then the College of Pediatricians came to our aid, and they made a website so that the donors abroad can uh, a way of getting drugs. Again, it was not very simple, because now for donors to get drugs to Sri Lanka, it is very difficult for them. Okay, so if they are shipping drugs, say they are buying drugs and shipping it to Sri Lanka, it takes a long time. Some of the drugs may be even expired, and in the ports there is a big procedure where you have to clear it. So that was out of the question. So the second option was whether they can directly procure drugs from Sri Lanka. So that we made a pathway so that they can directly buy drugs from Sri Lanka, and we have through our website. So that went through. But the only problem is, in Sri Lanka, even the agents are not now not having drugs. They are having drugs in short supply. So some of the essential drugs and vital drugs, we have to get them from broad companies, and pay dollars and get it down. So the practical difficulty of that is, you can't open LCs in our country, as I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry will very well know. It's almost very difficult to open a LC because of lack of dollars, and the banks won't open LSC. So the third option was whether the donors can send dollars straight away to our banks. So again, it's very difficult to open a dollar account. So the College of Pediatrician and the College of Physicians were able to open a dollar account where they can directly deposit dollars in these accounts. And again, but there are a little bit of problems, because again we had to buy from rupees. So although those are dollar accounts, we had to buy through rupees. So we are working on it and trying to make some system. The last option was bringing drugs from abroad. So that was possible by the diplomatic. The diplomats were given a small quota where they can bring about 5 kilograms. So things like surgical items, like suture materials, all the type of material, we are planning to get it down like that. So as Dr. Nilmini says, I mean, these are very difficult, and we can't sustain this. And we are talking about sustainability, whether we can go only by the donors. So we know that the government and the health department has some answers to that, in like they have now opened what you call a credit line, Indian credit line, where you can get drugs and procure equipment and other consumables. And also the central the World Bank has given a $10 million for drugs alone, and they are working on especially the WHO and the Asian Development Bank is working very hard on uh, the government and the health departments. We're working very hard on and getting through the WHO and the Asian Development Bank. So these are some of the answers there are, because we can't be depending on only the donors. As you see, it's very difficult because of this dollar crisis. Quite understandably, the finance department doesn't want any of the dollars to go out. So this is the ground situation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sayantan, over to you. Especially as someone representing the pharmaceutical industry, what are the challenges you're facing? Just tell us your experience and the daily challenges that you're confronting, especially representing the business perspective.
So, Vimanga, from the business point of view, I think both the doctors have laid the problems, and I can only reconfirm what they have mentioned. And as correctly Dr. Karunaratna said, 80% of the medicines in Sri Lanka are being imported. When I say medicines, there are three segments largely we operate. They are the pharmaceuticals, the medical devices, and even the local manufacturing. So even the 20% of local manufacturing, Vimanga, the raw materials have to be imported. The APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients have to be imported. So again, there's the import element in the local manufacturing. And pharmaceutical and medical devices are anyway, most of what's used, 80% are being imported into Sri Lanka. So the industry, the biggest issue, one of the main biggest issue we face to bring them down. The manufacturers have stocks, they have manufactured the goods, it's available overseas, but to bring them down, we are unable to establish the letter of credit, the LCs, or we are unable to make the advance payment. And even the TT, it's restricted by the central bank. Maximum you can establish is 50,000. Even to get that, the dollar scarcity is the biggest issue. I would name that's the biggest issue. So I think that had been elaborated. So while keeping the biggest issue of the dollar issue being number one, some of the other consequences are, once you bring it down, you also need to distribute. The product need to reach out island wide. So the fuel crisis is another issue which also impacts the industry in terms of distribution. And I would also add the fact the price that we had to purchase the dollar, the cost has gone up. So that is another issue, the affordability, where it had doubled up and the prices have gone up, largely being imported. And the pharmaceutical, also the storage, we need to keep it under the storing 24-hour storage, the fuel crisis, then we need the generators. And for generators, we need the fuel, and people don't have fuel for the generators. So these are some of the other issues. But if you nail it down, the biggest issue is the US dollar issue, which have been elaborated, which the industry is facing, Vimanga.
Thank you, sir. I think all. I mean, if you really look at the gist of what all three of you have said, I think we're really understanding the gravity of the situation, and we've also identified the basic root causes of the crisis, which all goes down to the lack of dollars, the kind of and the kind of macroeconomic issues and the impact that's overflowing on the health sector. So if I was just to quickly bring in some policy perspective, I think what we can all say is that we need some sense of macroeconomic stabilization to really help the health sector meet their current demand and also to really facilitate the health sector's progress. I would just like to shift a bit on the conversation, and I think this question we were start to get a lot of questions, but I think this question might be more relevant to Mr. Sandayan. Sir, what do you think? As an emergency measure to help bring down medicine, to help the pharmaceutical sector, do you think some form of tariff reform is essential so that you make that some of these essential medicines can be made affordable? Do you think an immediate tariff reform where you probably take off tariffs on imported medicine, will that be of some assistance?
Actually, Vimanga, the tariffs, there is no tariff for medicines other than few medical devices which involves the VAT payment or the Ports Authority levy, which may be around 10%. But if you compare to the other essential goods, the tariffs are lower for medicines because they are regulated and it's imported in. But the biggest issue is the price that we pay for the dollar. So the dollar, which was 203, which has come to now 365 rupees, which had 80% inflation, that's where the bigger cost is. So that's the only way I think we can reduce the prices of the medication to the rupee being appreciated. The more we get depreciated, I don't think there'll be an answer to the problem of costs coming down. So the biggest issue is the rupee value against the dollar, which is the larger portion of the cost.
Understood, sir. Understood. And if I was quickly going to just have a follow up there, just wondering, do you think we saw import restrictions kind of coming in over the course of the last 2 years? There were lots of policy changes. Did that impact the current shortages that we are experiencing, or is there some relationship that you feel from a business perspective? Was that part of the problem?
Thankfully, the medicines, be it the pharmaceutical or medical devices, did not come under the restrictions of imports. So we were allowed to import right throughout. But again, I would reiterate the fact the issue what we have is the dollar available to bring them down. But the medications were always available. So it was considered an essential item. And even throughout COVID and even now, I think medications were not restricted for imports. But the issue is the lack of dollars in the market, which is impacting the current situation.
Understood, sir. Understood. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been actually speaking for about 30 minutes. We've heard input from this eminent panel. So, I would like to invite our audience to start sending in your questions. And if you have any questions related to the current situation, please do shoot it out, and I will pick it up as they come along. If I was now just looking at it a bit, I think the purpose of our discussion is also to really understand the kind of actions that we need to do to come out of this crisis, or to at least survive through these crucial months until some form of macroeconomic stabilization is achieved. So. And I think Dr. Karunaratne also touched a bit on this, but I would like to extensively know from all of you your suggestions, what you think should be done in the short and medium term to really meet these demands. Now, you've spoken about getting donations, but do you see do you feel there are any other suggestions at a policy level that we can implement to really I would say control the situation on ground and meet our healthcare demands? Dr. Nilmini, would you like to?
Yes, I think short term, as we have implemented now for surgical services, we have sort of rescheduled most of the non-essential surgery, so that trying to cut down on the essential drug need, because if the patient undergoes surgery, they need intensive care, so that ended the care. So we try to cut down as much as possible. We had discussions with the ministry, and the ministry has also sent us a circular. Now we are only performing in most of the majority of the hospitals. We are performing only essential surgery, emergency, casualties, and only cancer surgery, because you cannot postpone cancer surgery. The cancer will spread. So by doing that short term, we have sort of restricted the workload, so that we don't spend all the suture material and anesthetic drugs and all the other intensive care consumables. So we try to cut down on that. So that way we have sort of we manage now. If some stocks we had only available for 3 weeks, so now we could stretch it to another couple of weeks or months. So that is one method sort of used. And also, I think the other problem is that people also have to be very careful these days. Know whether we can implement it as a policy, but I think if a lot of non-medical people are listening, meeting with an accident and all, getting into some, that the society unbelievably violent. So for a little small thing, people have lost their patience, they hit each other. So we get unnecessary casualties coming as a burden to the hospital. So if people can stop that, and if they are more careful when they are driving or even at home, because some of the essential, the orthopedic trauma surgery, we need some plates and screws and all that. So they are also in short supply. So we cannot perform the surgery. So they will have to suffer for a long period. So people have to, and I think in this kind of a crisis situation, I don't know whether it as a policy, but people know that we need to be resilient and also keep our mental health and stability when we are undergoing a crisis situation like that, because these stressful situations can increase the risk of heart disease, heart attacks, and people cannot, and their diabetic control, all that can cause more problems. So I think the community also has a responsibility to maintain, knowing that we are going through a very difficult situation. So short term, at least if we can cut down on the inflow of the patients to the hospital, then we can sort of stabilize. But we have seen that the patients coming to hospitals is increasing now. I think it is because of the cost. Now people who used to go to the close by dispensary doctor, they come to the, some small illness like fever or cough or some, we see an increased number of patients coming in. So short term, we have to try and sort of curtail the routine work and try to give the care to the essential and life threatening and sort of casualties. So those are the things that we can do short term. As I mentioned earlier, donations, I mean, you cannot sustain, as Dr. Karunaratna also mentioned, because these are all hard earned money by our people who are abroad, and they feel so bad about what's going on in Sri Lanka. They are trying to help. And as Mr. Sayantan also said, that another problem I want to highlight is, even if we have the dollars, we try to ask our the donors to pay directly to the company. Like, say for example, if your mother company is in, they pay dollars directly to the mother company, and then we get the drugs through the local suppliers. So some of the drugs we have got down like that. But the problem is sometimes, if like drugs like the muscle relaxants I mentioned earlier, they are not just available because they cannot keep the drugs produced. If there's no demand, they will expire. So when you make the payment only, they start production. So some of the drugs that we requested, they are coming only after 6 to 8 weeks. It takes time for them to produce, because those drugs have to be kept in the refrigerator, something called cold chain you have to maintain. So therefore, we will think about that also. So these are the challenges we are having, and I think it's generally, if you look at the policy changes, it's all up to the government, because there's so much of things that is not dependent on us, the clinicians. We can only try and give the best care to the patients who are coming to the government hospitals. But it is up to the government to take this as a very serious issue, because if you don't have electricity, you can actually light a candle or something. If you don't have life-saving medicines, we will not want to see the people dying. So I think the government has to take it very seriously, try to cut down on everything unnecessary, and try to maintain our essential health services. I think the fuel crisis, as Mr. Sandon said, it's also massively impacting us, because the doctors even can't get fuel. We have been given a pass, a special pass as essential services, but people won't allow you to go near. So we are scared, and we even do jump the queue. But I know that some doctors have waited 15, 16 hours in the queue. So how can we provide a good service to people if people don't allow us to go and get the fuel, and we are not doing anything unnecessary or non-essential travel now. We are only going to the hospital and coming back, but that has become a very very big challenge. So people come to work late or they don't turn up, so we are really struggling to maintain the health services.
Thank you, Dr. Nilmini. Dr. Karunaratne, would you just want to jump in on the same question of managing medium and short term needs?
Yes, I think Nilmini mentioned most of it. So basically, other than drugs, we have a shortage of reagents as well. So reagents are needed for essential lab services. So again, there is a lack, and it's the same problems apply to procuring reagents. So the reagents are now, say if you want to do a full blood count. Full blood count is essential to be done in a dengue child coming with fever. So if we run out of the reagents to do a full blood count, it will be disastrous. And the way we manage dengue is by doing several blood counts and seeing for reduction in platelet counts and seeing whether the child goes into leaking. So that is another problem. Again, reagents also, as Dr. Nandamini said, needs a cold chain. So the same problems apply to reagents as well. And of course, the reagents needed for blood gases. Now that's a huge problem. Now in Lady Ridgeway Hospital, we the only three blood gas machines are functioning. That is in the three ICUs. So we had a blood gas machine in my ward. That machine is, we have just switched it off. So because we can't, if you use it, if you on it, you have the reagents will be burnt. So we to cross cut, we have stopped using it. But if now some of those blood gas are essential inside the wards as well. So that's another aspect of this crisis. Other than drugs, the reagents will become a huge problem. So we have to find ways how to procure them as well. And again, from what Dr. Nilmini said, we are facing a lot of problems in because of the fuel crisis. Now in children's services, you have to be very. I mean, within few minutes, you have to go to the ward if a child is collapsed. Now, I faced a problem because I ran out of petrol, and I was called in to see a dengue child. I had a problem in getting there. So fortunately, I had very good registrars. They had done everything when I went there. But these are the practical things we find, and not only, I mean, in the centers. Now I can't imagine the problems the doctors are facing outstations. I have worked in most of the rural hospitals as well in the country, like in the East Ampara district, and so I mean, if you are a consultant or a doctor working in, say, a very far away hospital, you have to come and see your family at least once a month. I can't imagine them coming to see their family without fuel. So that's going to be a terrible situation. The family structure, everything is going to break down in our doctor community as well. So we are going to face a lot of problems if we don't address to this macroeconomics of this country. So that's beyond us. I mean, I don't want to talk about politics in this country. But if there are any politicians or anybody connected to politics listening, they should buck up, okay, and get together and come to some solution.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Sandan, just jumping in on the same question, what needs to be done on the medium and short term to really meet these needs? What's your input here? What possible solutions do you see?
I would come out with just two solutions. I think in this current short-term issue, I mean, whether we like it or not, things are scarce and it's limited. So when things are limited, rationalization is one of the answers. So I'm not here to say what is needed, what not needed, but whatever not needed, this is the time to cut down and to really, really focus on what is essential. Like Dr. Nilmini said, it's the essential surgeries which are done. So if certain items are needed, there may be 1,000 list items, out of which for essential, if it's only 500 needed, I think we need to focus and bring them down. when the dollars are limited. So rationalization is key, where we need to really focus what to bring down and what to halt or postpone. That is A. B, from a consumer point of view, coming from especially the long-term medication. There are a lot of diabetics in Sri Lanka, a lot of hypertension, or people who take medication for their heart. Be rational in your purchasing. So when things are limited, it's very irrational for a person to go and pick and keep 1 year stock, where a poor person may purchase only once a week. So don't take everything in the shelf. I know some pharmacies have taken measure. Hey, this we will limit only a card, or we will give only for 1 week. I mean, it's very good. But some they purchase and they just take off everything available. So if consumers can be rational in their purchasing for everyone to survive, I think that would be the second solution for short term, so that everybody survive in this limited and in this scarcity.
Thank you, sir. I think one of the questions that we keep getting, and I think this is more relevant to you, is on in the kind of cost inflation that we see in medicines. I also believe that for example in March a 30% price increase was imposed, and later a gazette was published that enabled the increase of prices of 60 types of medicines to about 40%. So I think there is some form of we see intervention, in the market, and we see a lot of price increases over the last months on a lot of these, and you've explained the kind of reason for this. But how do you think the consumer should really look at this, and should the price be actually passed on to the consumer? Do you think what needs to be done on that front?
So again, as I mentioned, when largely we are import dependent, like any other commodity which are imported into the country, unfortunately, is the dollar difference which is passed on to the consumers. So it's unfortunate that these are all imported items. So it's the price of the dollar, not that the industry is making profit or trying to make profit. Actually, some of the real, if you really see the inflation rate and the price increase granted, actually some of these medications are given even at a loss. It doesn't even cover. So the industry doesn't operate with large margins where you can stomach it. So maximum you can give is break even or a cost plus. So while these are essential items like any other commodity, I mean, you see the fuel prices have gone up, you see the gasoline prices have gone up, the gas prices have gone up. Similarly, unfortunately, today, the medicine, the essential prices have gone up as well, simply because of the impact of the dollars. So the only way to move on is to make the rupee stronger. But of course, the industry is also making appeals to the manufacturers, to donate drugs into Sri Lanka or devices into Sri Lanka, whether they can reduce the prices. So multiple negotiations are going, and the manufacturer also responded positively, and different ways they are helping out.
Mr. Sayantan, I think you're. Can you hear us?
It's the connection problem, I think.
Yeah. So until Mr. Sayandan joins us again, I think we can continue the conversation. I would just like to, and we've been discussing extensively in a lot of these issues, but I would like to just again shift gears to a bit of a different area, and ask our professionals here. Now, for example, during the Greece debt crisis, the health sector really experienced significant pain all throughout. But looking positively, this crisis actually helped the Greek health sector to innovate and come out stronger, implement real structural reforms that improved their productivity, that improved the service of the health sector. So when they came out of the crisis, they had made a lot of structural changes. Just wanted to know from the both of you as to what you see as current problems in our public health sector, and what are the kind of reforms that we need to do to really improve our health sector as we come out of this crisis. Because it is well known that structural reforms will need to be implemented for us to come out of it. So just want to know your opinion on what changes that will have to be made.
I
So
think,
actually, it has, yeah.
yeah, if we look at the, I don't know whether you all remember that when the government imposed 25 cent stamp long time back, it became very unpopular. So running 100% health service to a country like us, especially looking at our economy now, is impossible. So I think the government will strongly will have to think, because at least we must give some subsidies to the very poor and underprivileged people. But the people who can afford, they should contribute to the health sector by introducing an insurance scheme or some form of contribution from the public as well. Free of charge, people have no value and they just take things for granted. So I think that should be one of the reforms that we should look at from the policy point of view. And long term, I think bringing everything from abroad, it is something that we have to now, because we are depending so much on imports. So if India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh can produce drugs, why can't Sri Lanka do it? So I think this is a big policy change. They are producing around 150 medicines, as far as I was informed. But as Mr. Sayandan said, now even cotton wool, gauze is in short supply. Material is not available, although they are made in Sri Lanka. Now, one of the gloves company, which is a very famous one, we produce gloves and we export this. Now, it is when I went to the UK for my training, when I saw that Sri Lanka gloves being used in the United Kingdom. So we are making them, we are sending abroad, and some anesthetic airway equipment we produce in Sri Lanka in a BOI project. We export them and then we pay dollars to bring them back to Sri Lanka. So these policy changes have to be done, I think, very soon, because unless we, as Mrs. Andan said, if we don't make the rupee to appreciate, we are never going to see anything good in the future, because the cost will go up and people will, we might see people dying because of the lack of medicine and the essential medical care. So therefore the policy changes, although we don't like to talk politics, as Kosala mentioned, I think this is the policy changes have to come from the government, isn't it? So as clinicians, we can only try to help people at this crisis, but big policy changes have to be there. And production of medication, I know that there had been a lot of efforts, people wanting to make either BOI projects or bring in big medication plants to Sri Lanka. There's a lot of red tape and things that will not encourage people to come into the country and invest money in this. So if there is transparency and people can be ensured that there's no corruption or things like that involved, a lot of people might come and invest money with bringing us dollars, and also making us to be able to sort of be self-sufficient in most of the medication, because they are not very difficult to produce if you have good quality plants and we have people, and that will also make our people's employment rates also, and we maybe be able to export them, bringing dollars to the country. So I think those are the big policy changes as long term that I feel the country should adopt, and we should appreciate what we can make in Sri Lanka. I think in recent past couple of decades, we have been used to bring everything from abroad. That is the main reason we have come to this, I think, situation, not only medication. So we should not bring anything that can be produced in Sri Lanka. We have to promote patriotism in our people. If you go to India, they will only buy Indian stuff, right? So they will not allow to bring everything to the country. So by that, we will limit our dollars going out. So this kind of policy changes have to be come from the politicians and the government. That is my view on that.
Thank you, ma'am. Just because Mr. Sandayan dropped out, so we were discussing. I think before you dropped out. I mean, you can just rephrase what you were saying there. But saying that the next question that we took on was what the kind of structural issues that we have that the current health sector is experiencing. So what we were discussing was what needs to be done really address those structural issues when we come out of this crisis and make sure that there's a health that there's a better health sector. Uh, uh, so do you want to complete your statement that you were making before you dropped out, and then probably answer this question as well?
Probably I'll add on what's been discussed now. So one of the way forward action would be from a medical point of view or medicine's point of view is, as you know, any pharmaceutical or medical device need to be registered in Sri Lanka by the regulator, which is NMRA, which is National Medicines Drug Regulatory Authority. So I would say if the red tapes are being removed and if the new innovations can come in faster to Sri Lanka and also allow more alternatives. So the people or the patients of Sri Lanka have more alternatives, cheaper alternatives, and also the new innovations on long term, there are a lot of cost benefits. So by doing the process faster, if they can allow, it's one thing we can go, which can make a big difference to the pharmaceutical and the medical devices market in Sri Lanka. B, also allow more players, because NMRA, they charge in US dollars. So with that, the registering of a product, the prices have gone up as well. So some can afford it, some cannot afford it. So when your registration process itself are charged in US dollars, whether this can be made in Sri Lankan rupees, more affordable, more faster, so that you facilitate more participation in this field, allowing more competition, and more competition means the end user, the patient who is going to benefit. So I would propose these two, if this can come in, I think that could be another solution to the current problem.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Karunaratne, over to you.
Yeah, I think I totally agree to what Mr. Sayandan said. So we should start producing our own drugs, and especially now we started producing normal saline. So like that, I mean, we should start producing, but there is red tape, as he said. But for some drugs, the red tape is needed. Now, say if you are producing something like a liquid drug, the sterility and everything is important. So that has to be analyzed and see whether a particular solution is bacteria free. So that takes time, because you can't have shortcuts for that. So that takes time, and so there is a time limit that is anyway needed for NMRA to recognize it, and so you can't fast track it in some, because then we'll be flooded with drugs that may have problems. So you have to think about that aspect as well. And at the same time, as he said, there should be a system where it has been done in India, Pakistan. I mean, they are producing so many drugs. Why can't we? So simple, it's a simple question why we are not doing it. So that is because we now we have faced this crisis, and we should start it at some point. And now this is a good point. So paracetamol was produced by SPMC, and it has been distributed to most of the hospitals around the country. So we can start with drugs like that, and move forward to more complicated solutions and drugs which takes a bit of time to be recognized. So and at the same time, as Dr. Nirmini said at the beginning, there should be other cross-cutting methods in wards where you can share vials between wards. Because when we open a vial, usually the nurses throw the rest. So it can be easily used in the next ward. Now, Ledridge Hospital has 6 medical wards. So one vial can be easily shared. So, but the nursing staff is very reluctant, saying that, okay, this will discolor, and they don't like to use a drug that is open and given to them. So they have to break it, and then those are the red tape. I don't know how they have come into those, but you have to change those policies. And in this situation, we should cost cut and probably use and share vials, and the other thing is using the cheap options. Now, when you take say infection going on in a child, for instance, a pneumonia, so rather than starting with a very expensive antibiotic to be given intravenously, there are other antibiotics you can give now. So if you take ampicillin, that's an excellent antibiotic used in lower respiratory tract infections in children. But because there are other antibiotics, physicians, pediatricians, they try to go on to higher end antibiotics or the more expensive ones. So, like that, there should be some policy and guidelines for each hospital, so where the microbiologist should come and make a guideline and say, okay, this is the first line drug and this is the cheaper drug. Like that, I mean, we should have our guidelines. So, in fact, our college has a committee that is looking into it and making recommendations. So, at the same time, we have to give the best drug as best possible to the patient. So, the legal aspect is also there. We can't say, okay, there is a cheaper drug, we are going to give that when there is a better expensive drug. So we have to be legally safe as well. So there has to be protection for us doctors why we use that particular drug. So all these things are very important, ethical and legal issues. So, but what is important at the, I mean, again, is restructuring our, I mean, income for this country. So, and getting dollars, and probably invest the dollars in rather than importing, producing more drugs and other consumables in this country. I mean, cotton wool is a strange thing. We are lacking cotton wool in our hospitals, and Sri Lanka has so many cotton trees, and there are cotton plantations that was there in, I mean, small days. I don't know what happened to those plantations. So we can improve on that. So make factories. So many things can be done. So I think we should move forward from there.
Thank you, sir. And if I was just to entertain a few more questions, probably this might be again more relevant to Mr. Sam. That's just want to know. I think what some they have a question on whether Sri Lanka needs to have a pharmaceutical policy going forward, where we look at competition-based methods to control the cost of pharmaceuticals. So I believe if I was just to also add in here, because you emphasize the importance of deregulation, what do you see any other reforms that, especially in the sense of deregulation, that can also improve competition in the sector?
Vimanga, on that, I think already Sri Lanka has gone into the policies and there's a clear policy and it's been price controlled by the regulator. National Medicine Drug Regulatory Authority had already identified the largely used molecules and had put a price ceiling. This is the maximum price you could sell. So that way, already the policy is in place and the prices, I think it was implemented way back in 2016, and then there were more products included and there were more devices included as well, like intraocular lenses, glucometer, glucose strips, all these have been price controlled. So the policies are in place and I think the essential items are being covered under that, Vimanga.
Okay, sir. So I think the second part of that question was whether there is any immediate reforms in terms of deregulation that you see that can help create competition in the pharmaceutical sector.
So there, I would say if there can be a clear pricing policy, because of the US dollar, there is a clear inflation which has come in, and a person who, if a particular item you don't allow him to import anymore, and if the price ceiling doesn't allow him to have a reasonable profit, there may be people who may drop out, and some of the essential medication people may discontinue. So if there's a clear pricing formula coming to place with transparency, I think that will be a fair play, and that's something the industry would appreciate.
Thank you, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been actually going on for about over 1 hour now. So I think it's also about time to wrap up our discussion. But you can probably, if there's any more urgent questions, do send it across to me so that I can take it. But now I invite all our panelists just to make their concluding remark and share any more thoughts that you think relevant for us to, come out of the present crisis, and also what needs to be done to really help the health sector. Over to you for your final concluding thoughts.
Again, just a point, in the private sector also we are having a huge problem. Now we are talking about the government sector. The private sector now, when it comes to children, now I'm treating children every day, so we don't have Piriton syrup. So that is a huge problem, Piriton syrup, and most of the syrups are not available. So the small children, I mean, you can't make them swallow tablets. So whether we should go for alternatives or because syrups are always more expensive than tablets, so we should find some solutions for that as well. Now little baby comes with a cough or a cold, we prescribe something like Piriton. We can't give anything else for the little babies. So you can't break down Piriton tablets and shove it down their mouth. So little things like that. Again, I think the same problems apply to the private sector as well. The hospitals, the farmers, the small pharmacies that sell, they are also faced with the same problem, the dollar crisis, and they don't have enough drugs in their pharmacies.
Yeah, I think private sector we didn't discuss much, but I think having the private sector in Sri Lanka actually offloads the government sector, because if you think about all these patients coming to the government hospitals, we will never be able to supply that demand. So having a functioning private sector is also essential. And I see that because the cost of these implants and surgical items going up, many people will find it very difficult to afford. So the number of patients coming for surgeries will drop down, and that will make them coming back to the government sector, increasing and prolonging our waiting lists. And also there are a lot of staff depending being employed by the private sector. So it is also that their jobs may be at risk if the private sector collapses. So all these things have a lot of implications. And about the drug regulation, as Dr. Kanaratna said, I quite agree with that, because this we have seen as clinicians, sometimes they're very substandard drugs are coming to the country, and we report on them, and even devices. So we know that the making a profit is actually a part of the business, but sometimes unless there's a proper method, because especially during COVID time we saw that people tried to get things as pretending that they are donations, but they tried to bypass, because the NMRA tried to expedite the process, emergency registration, and they have been really helping with the donations that we have got down in the short term, because some of the items may be not registered in Sri Lanka, but they with the college recommendation, some of the products we managed to get, and they expedite that registration. But without a proper regulatory body going through very carefully, it is a risk to get down substandard drugs. So I think that is very important for us to remember. Although we want to fast track and expedite the process, maybe there are things that like that. I think the IT section and things may need to be a bit updated, are not very efficient. But increasing the efficiency should not compromise the safety and the quality of the drugs and items that we bring to the country. So and looking forward to implement something to be produced in Sri Lanka. I think all the local suppliers can get together and start thinking about that, creating a group, and maybe to start getting some plants so that you can produce some drugs in Sri Lanka. Otherwise, I think that is the way forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sayandan, sir, over to you.
So I would conclude by saying if the 20% what is being produced locally, if this percentage can go up, whether it can become 25, 30, so that it encourage. I think these had been what had been echoed by the two doctors as well. And to facilitate the policies, whether we can have more guidelines, more policies coming in to facilitate, so there is, it can encourage. And why not limit only to Sri Lanka? Why not we act as an exporter as well, we being the hub in the Asia? So if we can export, I mean, then we are in a competing position. I mean, as correctly said, if Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan can do it, why not we don't have it? I'm sure we have the competency, we have the talent, we have the technology. If we can put together, and I think this is the time to rethink. And if you can do that, first be self-sufficient, then go into the export market. I mean, that can be a game changer, and that will be my departing comments.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for joining this evening's session. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you. If I was before we conclude, if I was just simply going to share the kind of summary of what we discussed, I think we've really understood the kind of the gravity of the situation and the kind of impact the health sector is experiencing. Some of it is critical, and all these experts here highlighted the kind of action that is happening on the ground. Uh, and I think if I was just to add in a policy perspective, I think what this shows is the fact that we need a sense of macroeconomic stabilization and an immediate sense of an immediate macroeconomic stabilization program should be implemented. I think there's wide consensus for that. But if I was to also draw from the kind of experience that we've seen in Greece and other countries where there was the sovereign debt crisis, these crises also provided an opportunity to implement strong radical restructuring. And I think health sector probably is one of those sectors where we can implement the kind of reforms that will improve not only the standards but also equity and the quality of the existing health sector. I think there are issues of allocating efficiency that can probably be addressed. And I think another important factor that we've learned from a lot of these crises is the importance of protecting the most vulnerable cross sections of society. So I think those are areas, I think from a macro lens, where you need to bring in reforms that can actually help us move out of the crisis and achieve a sense of stability as we go along. Just sharing those thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Let's end this session, but also applaud all our sector workers and professionals, and hope and also make a voice for the implementation of these reforms that can really bring some sense of urgent and immediate stability. Ladies and gentlemen, absolute pleasure having you, and hope you have a pleasant evening. You can follow all our content on our Jakarta social media pages. Stay tuned for more such content. Have a pleasant evening.